Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Welcome back to LBMC Information Security Cybersecurity Sense. That is such a mouthful, but we love the name. It's long and it's unique. We're back again with another monthly PCI update, this time for March, but this will probably be pushed out just a little bit later than that. We're going to go over requirement 3, hit some news, and then just kind of catch up with the two gentlemen that we have here as per usual, Andy, Kerr, and Kyle. How's it going, guys?
It's going pretty good.
Right.
Yeah, we're making it. We're making it another month, another day, another podcast. All right, Kyle or Andy, whoever wants to kick off the news.
Sure, I can dive into that. The one thing I had noted is, several months ago, probably on our first episode, I think we released for PCI, we had talked about how, initially when PCI DSS 4.0 was being released, there was that option for in place with remediation. Ultimately, the council removed that, but then updated that they were going to provide some kind of worksheet for assessors to, work with their clients to kind of still do that same process, but just not have it be quite so public. Last week they made another announcement that's still the path forward, but as of yet we haven't seen it, and so they still say in a couple months it'll be released. So still waiting to see exactly how that shakes out.
Everything's always a couple months. 5 months later.
It's coming down the pipe. It's coming down the pipeline.
So I think it got clogged halfway through. Time to clear it out. All right.
That's exactly it. And another thing too, I think that Will, you might be able to speak to a little bit better, is I know that our pen testing services have released a new service, the Advanced Guard and Advanced Guard Plus, that from my understanding, it's pretty cool, kind of as in a sense, a little bit of like pen testing as a service, in a sense where you have a pen tester to help you throughout the year, also doing some things like security awareness. And just from my perspective, the little bit I've heard about it, it sounds awesome. And it sounds like something that I know our PCI clients, might be able to cover several requirements, or at least assist on several PCI requirements through the assistance of this service.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Kyle, as far as speaking more to that, you really just nailed it on the head and summed it up as far as a pen testing team that can kind of work with you throughout the year. And the point is it's like you have a contract, right? It's like an outsourced red team in a sense, where we will continuously check on things in your network. We'll test things on your network, make sure that they're, you're safe and you're secure. But extending further, it really does aid to help in case, let's just say, even a super far example, let's say that you have an attack that just goes to town. Someone just rips you a new one, right? Well, whenever someone asks us, or let's say we have a client who we've been working with for a month long, 2 months, 3 months, however long, the whole year, we will have an updated essential view of the network. And any questions they have over any machines that are existing on that network, or any kind of activity that we saw, or any kind of weird things that we saw, we can actually provide them pretty much near real time advice on, hey, there's a patch that needs to be released or updated immediately. We see that you have these devices on your network. We're going to send you an email, let you know, hey, we saw these last time we did a pen test. You should update these right now. That way nothing bad happens. There are a bunch of different really good use cases that Bill and I outlined on another podcast, which stay tuned, because we do have a podcast on Advanced Guard, which will answer a ton more questions. Bill does an amazing job of going through this thing. But I'm excited about it, and I know that you guys are excited about it as well, because they definitely do help hand in hand. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And with that, just as a note, this is a question that I've had a few times, I'm sure Andy has as well, is sometimes I'll have, one of my PCI clients ask me like, hey, if we use LBMC as like a pen tester, or, any other services, whatever they may be, is that going to be an issue for our PCI assessment, kind of the issue with independence? And at the end of the day, the short answer is no. For the most part, if you're just getting, our PCI services from us, you can still get whatever other services LBMC offers. It's just really on us to make sure we keep that all separate, and like in our case, we work on different teams. We have, different people. It's not like the same guy who's doing your QSA work is also your pen tester. Those are different people. It's all separated and documented. And, that's all on the up and up from the PCI side, which is where I think it's awesome to be able to, kind of kill two birds with one stone and have, LBMC take care of multiple items like that.
Right. And it's nice to have it all in-house whenever it comes to that, because it's not like you're having to transfer all these documents to a totally new organization, totally new company. It makes it so much easier. You already have your point of contacts laid out. It makes the process so much simpler. It really does.
I like it too, because when I have a pen test client that's, from LBMC, I can go right to the pen tester and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Get this report out." You know, you have a little bit more ability to go knock on doors.
Right. I know you're not supposed to be done with the report yet, but let me see those findings.
Let me see what detailed findings you have over there. Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Is that? I guess that's it for the news. Oh wait, no. There's another thing we got to talk about. Is it the newsletter?
Oh yeah, there was that newsletter. I know Stuart has been working on that and sent it out again. I think he had started it up kind of last year and now has started sending it out again. And so yeah, there's the LBMC PCI newsletter. I don't know the exact name of it, but
Right.
yeah.
And for
If
those
you
of you that
haven't
don't know,
subscribed to
Stuart
it-
is our PCI shareholder. So yeah, so just as a point of context there.
Yeah, and if you haven't, I think he's publishing that through LinkedIn. So anyone who isn't, go out there, check him out. Stuart Fay, subscribe to his newsletter. More awesome content.
I'll say it's really, really high quality. And I got a notification, I think yesterday I think he or the organization invited me to follow the newsletter. I was like, I'll go check it out. I'll go read it. It's really high quality. It's good stuff. Stuart's pumping out great stuff, just like you guys are pumping out great stuff for the podcast. And we're just trying to make everybody more aware and PCI compliant. So that's good stuff. All right. Well, shall we jump into the meat of the episode? Requirement number 3. I feel like we need to have like a little soundtrack or something to play to like. Oh man! But anyway,
this is the scary one.
Right,
the scary one that everybody flips out about.
In my opinion, requirement 3 is either the hardest or the easiest, depending on how you approach it. And the big question
100%.
is, do you store
100%.
cardholder data? Because it's the easy button. If you don't want to deal with requirement 3, you want to make your life easy, give that information to your bank, stop storing it.
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
easy. I'm gonna pull out the button at some point.
I agree with Kyle 100%. Either if this is the stressor of everybody, like, oh my gosh, I don't know. What if we start searching through a database and start, finding credit card information and all this stuff, or it's, hey, no, we've outsourced this. We're good.
Right. So
it's one of those things to think about. A lot of times, if you're working at a place that sells shoes, their specialty is selling shoes. They are not a bank. You sell shoes, you do what you're good at, let your bank be your bank and do what they're good at and protect that type of information.
That applies a bunch of different areas, but truthfully, whenever you can actually outsource stuff like that, people that are professionals in those specific areas, you'll find that your life, 1, gets a lot easier, but 2, well, actually just makes everything easier. That's about it. It makes everything easier and you don't have to worry about much. So
And here's the challenge. I have, over the years that I've done PCI, and I've been doing PCI for 7-8 years, something like that. You run into these instances where folks have correctly found some sort of third-party service provider that they've been able to outsource all their stuff and everything, which is great, which is fantastic. And what I find that a lot of assessors fail to do is do some extra digging or do that validation. And what I mean by that is, you'll go through all your regular channels. Hey, we have an e-commerce, but yeah, we do an iframe or a redirect when that's out there. Or we use P2PE, and so we don't have any cardholder data. Okay, well, that's great. Let's talk about chargebacks and refunds. And so chargebacks and refunds, yeah. And let's talk about chargebacks and refunds. How are you guys handling that? And you start digging, and you open up a hole, and then you start going down the rabbit hole, and you come to find out that, hey, we've got cabinets full of credit card information that we store on hard copies for whatever reason. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but then there's a whole set of requirements that have to kind of go along with that. And so these little pieces that tend to creep up sometimes, people just forget. And so and again, not to start looking at some of these additional requirements on down the line here, but one of the key ones is, hey, make sure that you're reviewing your scope fully every single year, which is going to be a new requirement for 4.0. It's not there yet for 3.2.1, but it's coming. And I think it's going to be great for folks to keep in mind these chargeback processes, and they fall into storage of credit card information. And so you're going to see a lot of times people just didn't know it was happening, or there was a change in process and, upper management wasn't notified. And it's usually right at the analyst or the customer service folks.
You're always in the clear until someone asks that one question. What about the refunds? How's that being handled?
This is why, and to add on this just a little bit. So again, this is another common thing that we see even with 3.2.1. It's always with, it's going to be with 4.0 as well. is that when we're in these interviews, your QSA is asking you specifically, hey, I want to make sure I get these boots on the ground folks on this interview. Well, the managers can speak to it. I understand that. I get that 100%. But the managers are speaking to the way the process is supposed to be. That
Yep.
doesn't necessarily mean that translates down to those boots on the ground folks. So this is why when your QSA is sitting in front of you and starts asking you for all these interview folks, and they start saying, "Hey, this person that's in this call, are they a director or a manager?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I need an analyst. I need somebody that's actually doing this every day. So managers, first of all, to all the clients out there, don't be offended when your QSA asks for a boots on the ground person. They're not saying that you don't know, but 9 times out of 10, if there's a process that has changed somewhere or something that's done differently, that analyst is going to be the first one to know about it.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, that's just it. Like I ran into an issue one time where, unbeknownst to everyone, the accounting department at a client was receiving clear text card number from their bank as part of their refund and chargeback process, and no one knew about it. And that's a good note. There is, just because your bank or your acquirer is providing you access to something does not mean it's automatically PCI compliant. You still need to make sure,
Yes.
they may
Yeah.
well send you a spreadsheet of credit card numbers. That doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with that spreadsheet. You still have to protect it accordingly if you need that for business purposes.
Ooh.
100% on that. I could not agree. I have seen many, many acquirers send full spreadsheets for chargebacks with full pan in it. And the thing is,
Hmm.
it's in their portal. That's fine. It's protected. But the moment you download that report onto your workstation, now you've got stored cardholder data.
Yep.
Ooh. Ooh. That one hurts. That hurts right to the
Yeah.
heart right there. Oh man. So I guess going off that, what changes are we kind of looking for here with the 4.0 to this stuff?
Sure. One of the first changes is, this is, you're going to hear us say it on every other requirement as we go through them. One of the big changes is better documenting of those roles and responsibilities. And just like Andy was just saying, making sure you actually know who's doing what, and do they have the authority to do it, making sure that's all solidly documented. That's, just across the board with 4.0, and it includes, requirement 3 as well.
I'm going to get a background at some point that says better documentation up on the top behind me. PCI dash better documentation.
It's huge
Yeah.
with 4.0. I agree with Kyle. This is something that the council has really started to do this shift and be very adamant about detailing all these different processes, how this is happening. Again, I feel like they've done it in the past, but I feel like they're really going after it now. All right, roles, responsibilities. Who are we going to? Who is this buck stop with? Who are we going after when everything goes wrong?
Love it.
Probably the next big change, really is the handling of SAD, which SAD
Yeah.
is sensitive authentication data. And that's things like track information from, when you do a MAG stripe, or it can be the CVV code, the 3 digits on the back of your card, or PIN numbers, PIN blocks. All of that type of information is stuff that you are not allowed to store it, but you sometimes obviously have to store it prior to authorization. And so if you
Right.
do store it prior to authorization, there's now some added requirements in there to make sure you are encrypting it, and properly securing it. Because in the past, it's always been a little bit of a gray area that, oh, this is pre-auth, we can do whatever we want. And now 4.0 is locking that down a little bit to say, even pre-auth, you need to handle this better. Because sometimes you have cases like, like hotels can be a good example where, you swipe your card right when you get there, and you don't actually get charged until you leave. And so that whole time period, they're storing that information pre-authorization. And so now they're saying, even if they're storing that for a week, they need to make sure they're doing it in a compliant, secure manner.
What does SAD stand for again?
Sensitive authentication data.
Okay.
And
it's a new acronym for me. So
if a QSA finds it during an assessment, it makes us sad.
That was well played.
Well, that, and you'll see the client become very sad as well.
It goes both ways. That was good.
Depending on how bad it is.
Under the umbrella, they've retooled this a little bit to make it more clear in 4.0, but there's the umbrella of account data. And that's really any information contained on a credit card number. And then the information like cardholder name, the cardholder number, or PAN primary account number, that information, that's all cardholder data, or CHD. And then there's SAD, or sensitive authentication data. And that's
Gotcha.
those pieces like the track information, the CVV code. That's the stuff that you can't store long term. The only caveat there is sometimes for an issuer, they are obviously required to store some of that to support issuing services, but just standard merchants and service providers should never be storing that after authorization.
Right. Right. Okay.
And that
So-
kind of leads us into that kind of next section there is that, there's, we talk about these new requirements constantly and, we're kind of hitting everybody over the head with them like, there's a ton of them. But PCI has also kind of gone above and beyond and clarified a lot of things as well. So one of the pieces that Kyle was kind of alluding to there, there's been some clarification as far as the masking of PAN and, when that needs to be done, how that needs to be done. And that it's only displayed for those folks first of all that have and again this kind of goes back to several different verbiage components throughout the entire rock is that business justification piece to see that full pan. Otherwise it just needs to be the last four digits of that pan, so again more of a clarification on what that needs to look like.
right.
Mhm. Yeah, and with that, kind of for what you can see, historically, you always hear people talking first six, last four. That's where,
Yep.
and going into 4.0 now, it's going to be BIN, which is the bank
Right.
identification number, and last
Right.
four. And the reason for that change is historically, BINs have always been 6 characters long. So that's all you needed to do. And if you don't know this, basically those first 6 digits on your credit card, they don't mean anything for you particularly. That just tells who issued your card. You can actually go look up BIN lists and you can type in the BIN, the first 6 digits on your credit card, and it will tell you where you got your card from. Specifically, if it's a Visa card and what bank it came through, all of that is those first 6 digits. But like everything, they're starting to run out of space. And so now some cards are being provided with 8-digit BIN lengths just to provide more options. And so that's where going forward, you may need to have times where you can see that first 8 and last 4. But one thing that's real tricky about it is the way that the requirement is now written in 4.0 is you can only see the BIN and last 4. So if you have a database where you have some 6-digit BINs and some 8-digit BINs, you can't default to just seeing all 8 digits because then you're going to
Right.
see extra digits on those 6-digit BINs. So you're going to have something to say, hey, this is a 6-digit BIN, only look at the first 6. And this is an 8-digit BIN, we can look at the first 8. Or if you want to be safe, just still stick to first 6, last 4.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I was always curious as to how I would type in my credit card and I would see Visa or MasterCard or whatever pop up. And I
That's
was
it.
like, I knew
That's
it
where
had
the
to be
BIN
the
number
first
comes in.
few. I thought it was like the
Mhm.
first 4, but you're saying it's the first 6. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
learn a little something new today,
Yeah. Usually
Well,
the first digit actually will tell you what card number it is. That'll
Oh,
tell you Visa, MasterCard. Like I think MasterCards all start with 5s generally. So the first digit will generally tell you the specific, but then the first 6 will get down to telling you specifically what the issuing bank is.
gotcha. Okay.
and those folks that, and again, a lot of times this is going to be the database folks that are working with, those databases all day, every day, and they're going to be looking in there and, hey, as far as our tables are concerned, this is how we need to do this and so forth and so on, which kind of leads us into our next section here. And there's a new requirement that has kind of come out, and it's specifically talking about preventing the copying and relocation or copy and pasting of PAN. Again, there's a little bit of a point here of remote access technologies. So this was, and I don't have it in front of me. I think if I'm not mistaken, Kyle, I think it was like 12. It was 12.3 dot something. Is the new one? What was formerly about copy and pasting? I think it was 12.3.10
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. So, so there's going to be some new requirements about, hey, business justification for those folks that absolutely need to use remote access technologies in order to copy and paste PAN. So this is something that, again, at least the least privilege. If you don't need to be copy and pasting, if you're doing, like, for instance, administrating, a particular server that's in the CDE, or something that is a part of the CDE, do you really need to be copy and pasting any kind of full PAN? No. So all right, so we'll restrict that data, restrict that access, and that's something that can be done through GPOs and several other different technologies that are out there, kind of restrict that copy and paste component. But yeah, I've kind of already seen some of this in some of my clients already, even before 4.0 came out. There's no reason for these people to be able to copy and paste, but it is a configuration change that will need to be adapted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in general, I would say, copy and paste is one of those things that for remote access, when you're VPNing in, it should really be, as needed only. It's just easy to make sure you don't have, data loss if they can't copy it. Obviously you still run into the issue that someone can take a picture with their phone, but you can only,
Yeah.
You can stop as much as you can, and the rest you have to cover with policies and trying to just make sure good hiring practices, etc. But at the same time, as many controls as you can put into place, the better, because that too, it stops accidental loss. Where someone just thinks, oh, I can copy and paste this down to my desktop, and they don't realize that they're expanding scope now.
I will say it is frustrating when you can't copy and paste, but when you realize and understand the reasoning behind it, it makes much more
Yeah.
sense. You're like, oh, okay, that just saved us a ton of trouble later on if something were to happen.
Like, a thing that scares me is, like, even my mouse I have, it has memory inside of it, so I can connect between two computers, and
Mine
I can
too.
copy and paste into my other computer.
Yep.
Which, if I can do that,
we're
that
all
right there,
expanding the scope.
yep. All of a sudden, I just pasted PCI data to my personal computer, and that makes a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Well, feeding into the next topic as far as copying and
Yeah.
pasting.
One of the next ones after that, I was thinking about this because the next one it talks about that if you're using cryptographic hashes, you need to use keyed cryptographic hashes. And on that, and several of the other parts of requirement 3 in general, all have to deal with just by standard encryption and decryption, which I feel like to some degree it might be good for us to at some point have a conversation just on that, because it's almost possibly a little bit too technical just for this conversation that we're having talking through it. And I feel like it might be nice to go through a deep dive of when you're talking about requirement 3, you have your KEX and your DEX, or your key encrypting keys and your data encrypting keys, and even possibly some visuals of how all that works. So I don't know what you guys think, but I almost think that some of that it might be nicer to wait and maybe in a future episode dig into some of those encryption practices and explain exactly what's going on and how to make it compliant, because otherwise it's difficult to talk through it at a high level without just rattling off acronyms and sounding confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be. I think that's going to be a tough one for some folks. And again, I've run across this myself. Those that are actually hashing PAN, for whatever reason. And now, okay, well now I'm using, SHA-1 or whatever in order to hash our, and it's usually because they have some sort of legacy older system or something like that. Well, now we have to use a cryptographic hash that has to have keys in it. And again, to Kyle's point, there is a whole process, just like you would manage the keys if you were doing something like a merchant managed solution encrypting PAN, and then now you're going to have to manage those keys. And now if you're hashing some of that PAN, you're having to manage those keys. And so, yeah, it can really quickly snowball.
Also, too, within the next few years, this is just, I'd like to say this is my opinion, but this is what people are talking about on the back end from what I've heard. With the development of quantum computing and as far as cryptographic stuff goes, I know that they're in the works right now. By I think 2025, 2026 is when they're trying to make that shift to really start enforcing that kind of quantum computing based encryption, which they already have like 4 or 5 algorithms picked out for traditional computers like we're using right now, like you're listening to this on. But I know that that's definitely going to wreck some people whenever that happens too. So a full episode of this, I'm not going to talk about quantum on that full episode, but a full episode of cryptographic keys and whatnot probably would be helpful for some people.
Just kind of an explainer, kind of a encryption for dummies a little bit, because I know I get confused on it, and following which key does what and where you have to store them and how you do dual control, all that kind of stuff can really get confusing.
Yeah. And this is something, again, I want to make sure I say this to everybody out there, all the merchants that are listening, is that people that manage their own keys and their own encryption, everything, this is not a common thing. This is not, most folks will get a listed solution or even something from their acquirer, a non-listed solution where they're not managing keys. I've only dealt with 2 major huge companies that were actually doing exactly what they're having the dual knowledge, dual control, managing their keys. So I don't feel like I've run across too many people that are hashing their PANs enough to where I think this is going to be a serious issue for most folks. But again, if it's out there and you are doing it, then yeah, it will become. Maybe it's time to start looking at de-scoping.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you'll hear us talking about how much of a pain it is and decide it's finally time to pull the trigger on just outsourcing that.
Use the shrink ray and shrink your scope.
The last couple new 4.0 items, for requirement 3 though are I think good and kind of straightforward. The one is that historically it's been a little bit of a gray area where there's some misconceptions if you use disk level encryption and if that's really encrypting your data. And the truth is it's not. And they've now clarified that to say if you have disk level encryption, that's all well and good. You still need to have actual, like table, file, et cetera, level encryption. Because the problem with disk level encryption, if you are using disk level encryption in an AWS, environment, that's kind of automatic. And what's the chances? The only way disk level encryption is ever going to protect you is if someone actually literally breaks in there, takes your physical hard drive, and runs off with it. Yeah, then it's good. But every other time someone accesses that, the disk level encryption is doing nothing. And so that's where you need to actually have, file, column level, et cetera, some other kind of actual encryption that prevents someone who just gains access to that information from reading it while they're viewing it live.
This is going to sound like a silly question. Maybe it's not a silly question. I know I just thought about this. Can you do disk level encryption and then have another level of encryption on top of that that's not disk focused? Can you encrypt it? Double encryption.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because generally disk level encryption is in a sense not effective when the disk is live and the information is running. It's really at boot up it would have to the keys, etc., would be provided to like a TPM chip or whatever might be providing that disk level encryption. It's the same thing like with your laptop. Generally you're going to have BitLocker or something on it, and the goal of BitLocker or any type of computer level encryption like that is if it's off and you forget it in a cab, if someone turns it on, they can't get access to it. If they pull that hard drive out, they can't get access to it. But if you leave it logged in at a coffee shop, they have full access to it regardless of BitLocker. And so that's really the same thing with disk level encryption. If someone somehow manages to steal that hard drive, they get it. But if they're logged in and accessing it, they can still see it. Really, the only place in PCI where disk level encryption is important is going to be if you have cardholder data on like removable backup drives or on like a USB drive for some reason, again, usually for backup purposes, that those should be, encrypted at the disk level. Other than that, it's not doing you a whole lot of good directly.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I've seen a ton of that, like the disk level encryption component more on, like for instance, pen testers. I've seen a lot of disk level encryption from pen testers because the amount of data and client information that kind of comes onto their laptops is like, okay, the fear is, to Kyle's point, if that was left at a cab or a coffee shop or something, nobody would be able to get into it. And so because of the clients, they'd have booted up, you have your BitLocker, 50 character password or whatever it is, and then you've got your regular username and password, and so
now we're having YubiKeys show up, so you're having little keys to plug in to allow the information to flow through. I'm actually going to get one of those soon, but it is true though. Whenever it comes to stuff like that, you do store the information on there. To Kyle's point, whenever you leave something open in a laptop, or when you leave a laptop open at a coffee shop, and you don't lock it,
you deserve it.
It's coming for you. Somebody's sitting there waiting for you to get up and go get your cup of coffee. They're going to sit down and do something. But honestly, though, like
My Little Pony on your desktop.
Right. Well, I did that one time in the office, and Daniel came over and he changed my wallpaper to Bill Dean's face, and I got back because I just went and got a cup of coffee. And that's how I learned. He was like, you can't leave your laptop unlocked. Keep in mind, this was like my first day of my internship. So like this all happened in a matter of less than 10 minutes.
And for context, Bill Dean is our penetration tester shareholder. So.
Yes. And Daniel is my manager. So one of my various managers. But yes, anyway, so just make sure you lock your stuff, even if you're out somewhere else. That's just a simple little reminder. But I know that we have a couple questions here that people want to know the answer to, or they may have a question about. So can I store SAD if I encrypt it?
And the answer is no. Like we said, if you're storing it pre-auth and you need to, then yeah. And right now with 321, it's a gray area. recommended that you should encrypt it. Are you required to? No. But once 4.0 comes out, you're going to have to encrypt it if you are storing it prior to authorization. But once it's authorized, once you have, that payment being processed, you cannot store it. You need to wipe it, more or less immediately.
And there are very few instances and cases where any merchant would need to store SAD pre-authorization. It does happen occasionally from time to time. It's usually, and in my experience, and Kyle, you can speak to this as well. It's usually one of those where you have like a store and forward kind of situation to where, hey, we're running cards, something's gone down, there's been no authorization piece, we're going to store it temporarily. Okay, it's stored, now encrypted or whatever it may be.
Or once in a while, I'll run into a place that does like bulk processing where they only send it all in at the end of the day. And so they have to store it for that period of time, but similarly for that, it's always one of those things that with PCI in general, you should always think, are we doing this because we have to, or are we doing this just because this is how we've always done it? Because if you don't need to store SAD at all, don't. If you don't need to store cardholder data at all, don't.
Right. So don't be sad, be happy. Follow the guidelines. And then second most, does encrypting PAN reduce my scope at all?
And that's another one that just by default, the answer is no. It is depends, yes. But, an important thing to think about when talking about scope is some people have the mistaken idea that if you encrypt your PAN, as required in requirement 3, that it somehow reduces your scope. But the thing is requirement 3 is telling you how to protect in-scope information. So if you are the one that you're managing your keys, you're managing your encryption, just because you encrypt it, it means nothing. That's just a requirement. If you don't encrypt it, you're just non-compliant. So encrypting it is kind of table stakes. But to Andy's point, it is kind of it depends, and encryption can reduce your scope.
Right.
And key thing here is, and I want all the merchants out there, the rarity that you actually do your control of your own keys and you're managing all the encryption. If you want scope reduction, you're going to have to get a merchant managed solution certification. Otherwise, it's all in scope. So just keep that in mind, because if you guys are controlling the keys, then ultimately we're going to come in and we're going to go, all right, well, everything's pretty much in scope here because you're managing your keys. There's some variations that we can take, but ultimately, if you want to significantly reduce your scope and you're doing it all, then you need to go ahead and certify your solution. It's called a merchant managed solution. There's a whole separate certification out there for it. You have to go through a certain process. It can be painful, but it's completely separate from your from your regular report on compliance. Completely separate assessment.
Yeah, and otherwise, like if you are doing things like you have, for instance, a P2PE POI device for accepting, someone comes up, they swipe their card into a P2PE device, that data gets encrypted, and because that in a P2PE solution, you, the merchant, do not have any access to those encryption algorithms, you do not have any access to the keys, you can't alter that. Because of that, that does reduce your scope. That information's flying across your network, you have zero access to break into it, so you don't need to consider that in scope. So if you are, leveraging a third party to do all of your encryption practices, there is a chance it can reduce your scope and make it so wherever that data is, transmitting isn't in scope for your assessment. But it's always something, a QSA is always going to look at it and confirm, is it actually implemented correctly? Are you doing what you need to do to reduce that scope? And the flip side can also be true. If you're a service provider and you're providing some type of, storage solutions, et cetera, to a merchant, and the merchant manages all of the keys and you have no access to that data or the ability to decrypt that information, you don't necessarily need to consider that data is in scope for your PCI assessment. That's still the merchant's information. So encryption can affect scope, but just because you encrypt your own data with your own keys, that doesn't affect scope.
Okay. So remember, downsize if you need to. It may help you in the long run. And logically thinking, I would probably downsize if I could and just hand off that half of stuff to somebody else. Because it's just, again, it reduces the pain you have to go through. It makes everything easier, assuming that they're a verified vendor that does what they should be doing.
In all honesty, I feel like most of the entities that still store cardholder data are ones that have been doing it for years and years, and it's just hard to move away. But now there's so many services and so many service providers out there, payment gateways, etc., that can handle all of that for you, and you don't need to. And so that's where I feel like it's mostly kind of that, technical debt in a sense of storing cardholder data and just trying to retool things and get it moved over to someone else.
Right. It's always the
100%.
legacy systems, man. Everything's
Yeah.
sitting on the back burner. Well, all right, guys. Do you guys have anything else to leave our viewers, our listeners, our fellow merchants with? Any parting
No.
words? No?
No, just 4.0 is coming sooner than you think. We're talking about Q1 of next year. 3.2.1 is retired. Now, again, there's still a lot of those requirements won't be coming to effect until 2025, but the time for preparation is now.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you again for another awesome podcast, Andy and Kyle. We always love having these conversations. I feel like we have a good time when we do it every time. It's just fun to talk about PCI, you know? But thank you guys again for listening to LBMC Cybersecurity Sense. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
See you, everybody.